Hey, how's everybody doing? This is we are in the final tactical mile of day one of Quad A. So I know how that goes, and many of you are looking for that third cup of coffee because we got to get ready for tonight's activities. Oh my God, another party! So what I'd like to do. My name is Brigadier General Doug Gabram. I'm the Aviation and Missile CG. I just took over a little over 60 days ago. So I'm behind General Gaylor by about, plus or minus 40 days, and still trying to understand the job. But what I'd like to do is first introduce my team. No, we're not going to sing for you. We're pretty good as of last night, but I'd like to introduce our team because all the hard questions, if you got any, I'll probably defer to them. But so I just want to start in the middle here. My battle buddy, Command Sergeant Major Glenn Vila. And we got Colonel, you can hold your applause. Colonel Andy Ginlett, he's the Aviation Logistics Center Deputy. CW5, Leon Cardona, he is the Senior W5 in AMCOM. He's my Senior Warrant Officer. We have Colonel Todd Royer, he's the Chief of Staff. So any former Chiefs of Staff out there, you know how that goes. And then we have Colonel Garner Pogue, who's the CCAD commander, our depot commander at Corpus Christi, which is really critical. You see, he gets an applause. Yep, no carryover, on time, revenue, okay. So what I'd like to do is just start out with some opening comments and then go to Q&A. And I get a privilege to talk to the team tomorrow at 10:30, and I know that's almost the last day, but I'd also like to highlight my battle buddy, Brigadier General Marion, PEO Aviation. So the first thing I like to say, and General Gaylor alluded to it, many of you have lived it, is the power of teamwork and the power of the enterprise. So the enterprise is the branch, General Gaylor, who you just heard from. His battle buddy or wingmen are myself, Aviation Missile Commander, Bob Marion, PEO Aviation, and the Army staff, specifically DAMO AV, who've done a lot of hard work. So that enterprise is very powerful, and many of you in the audience, I see some friends and peers and old bosses out there, have worked in that enterprise and done great things to where we are today. So I take it very seriously. I'm proud to be a part of that team. We are proud to be a part of that team, and it's extremely powerful as we move forward. So with that, what is AMCOM? What's our core competencies? And I'm going to talk a little bit tomorrow, and I won't let the cat out of the bag, about the cost of sustainment, the cost of ownership, some of the challenges I think we face with the declining resources. So if you have a curve, if you will, life cycle costs, if you picture those going up like this, increasing, and you got declining resources going down, you got a sustainment gap. Well, that's a problem statement that we got to get after, and I'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. So our core competencies, essentially there's 8 of them now, because many of you have heard, and every time I go on the road and do something, just like AUSA just a couple months ago in Huntsville, as General Vi got up to talk, and you probably heard one of the biggest questions, so tell me about the new order, the Mission Command Realignment Order, which put AMRDEC and ACCR under operational control of AMCOM. So I'll briefly talk a little bit about that. So many of you, I don't want to make a judgment of what age we're over here in the audience, but pre-9/11, that's the way we used to do it. So the circle of life, maybe back to the beginning. And I think there's huge gains and promise with the way we're going with the Mission Command Alignment Order. So, number 1, support to acquisition, AMCOM, sustainment logistics, the organic industrial base, which is our 2 depots, obviously with Corpus Christi. We also own Letterkenny up in Pennsylvania. Calibration, we're the DoD lead in calibration. Security assistance with SAMD, many of you have heard of that. Field sustainment maintenance. And the last 2 with the order is research development, RD&E, and engineering, and contracting. So those are the 8 core competencies that lie within AMCOM. So the order I talked about, the mission command order, and I'll get off this and get to Q&A and let all the smart people talk. It's extremely important because what we have done with Amerdeck and Mr. Lackey, I believe, is here. He's walking around here somewhere. And then ACCR, why did we do that? We did it so we can prioritize, we can synchronize, we can integrate the priorities, not only of AMC, but the Army. So based on fiscal constraints and declining resources, what better way to bring everybody in those two key organizations? And if you've been at Huntsville maybe a day or two, you understand that we're working very closely already. But this is going to make it even better. So we're really fired up about that, and we're looking forward to that, to continuing that relationship. And oh, by the way, PEO Aviation is right in the middle there with us, and we're hand in hand, lockstep together. So I just wanted to mention those couple points, and I will assume the position here, and we'll start to sing. And go ahead and fire whatever questions you have for us. If not, then I'm going to have to, Jen, this is high. All right.
Hi, Jen Judson with Defense News. I wanted to ask you about green suit maintainers versus contract maintainers. And I know that the Army is trying to move more toward using green suit maintainers instead of contract maintainers. So I wanted to get a sense from you, what is the effect of that? Are you seeing savings? Are you stumbling onto new challenges? And how are green suit maintainers able to handle all of their other jobs in addition to what they have to do on the maintenance side?
Okay, I'll hop onto that one because I definitely have an opinion on it. The cost of sustainment, and again, I don't want to talk it all today, but it boils down to 3 P's: people, parts, and process. We got to get after those 3. So part of the people, Jen, is the contractor balance. And what is it? I think we're out of balance right now. I think we're contractor heavy. I think we've lost the maintenance management skills of our soldiers. And General Gaylor, when we talked about it this morning, when we take, for example, the 101st and 4ID, they go to Afghanistan with their pilots, their aircraft, their staff, but we don't take their maintainers. So and it's all contractors, and that's who's doing the maintenance over there right now in Afghanistan. We did that because of FML. We understand that, but there's a second and third order effect. So break. I think contractors augment, but they don't replace basic availability. Now, we have to do within the Army, we have to get back to that balance. And I think we're a little bit out of balance. And we'll do our part to do that. Any other comments?
So I think the only other thing that I would probably add to that is one of the things, that General Gabram tries to do within AMCOM is to make sure, that those huge spikes are not necessarily there. So as we start going back more towards green suit maintenance, we want to make sure that a certain level of capability from a contractor perspective is there in case we need to surge at any point. But we want to make sure that those green suit maintainers have the appropriate skill sets so they can do it on their own. Over.
And I would add that soldiers are the primary maintainers, and we must always reinforce that aspect of soldiers as the primary maintainers. So whether the contract maintenance is performing primary maintenance functions or contract maintenance is performing pass-back functions, is where we get into understanding the augmentation piece. I think what becomes problemsome when contractors become the primary maintainers in any given function, capacity, or role, then we encounter challenges, and we must we do some soul searching within Army Aviation. When contractors are there in an augmentation role for pass-back maintenance, either because there's a capacity that it exceeds our organizational force structure, or there's a capability not inherent with our organizational force structure, then there's a necessary role for contractors. There's pretty much always been a necessary role, but it's understanding the level and the missions, functions, and purpose of the contractors that we have to balance.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Speak up, Garner. Yeah, can you hear us in the back?
So
all right.
I think it's a really good point, and you think about the need for contractors, and that need is based upon the requirement and really the number of flying hours being flown by the fleet. So Andy said, it was a key word you said when you talked about pass back. We pass maintenance back up through the chain, all the way down to all the way back to depot level in some cases, but certainly that the requirement for contractors is to meet a surge demand. Certainly soldiers always at the core of our Army maintenance.
So just an analogy, in the beginning of the war, let's say 2003, our S time was about 10%. So what we did is we threw money and contractors at it, and now our S time is between 3 and 5%. We had about $4.2 billion in parts in 2003. We got about 6.3 approximately today. Objective is going to about 5.5. We don't want to be where we were, but the S time is, we reversed that. So our NMC M time, maintenance, somebody want to take a stab where that's at today? This is the audience participation time. It's over 25%, and it has been for the last 11 to 13 years. So we're working on that.
Hi, James Drew from Flight Global. With future vertical lift being very, very, very far out, we don't have a defined time. You're going to be keeping the Apache, the Chinook, and the Black Hawk in service for a very long time. Obviously, you're still receiving new aircraft. How are you going to deal with the sustainment challenge of looking after these aging airframes? And do you think it will be a difficult transition moving from maintaining, models that you've maintained for a very, very long time to something completely new? Or how are you planning on managing that sort of a transition?
Well, first off, and I don't want to work the mic back to my battle buddy General Marion back there, and I don't have the FVL numbers off the top of my head in terms of the out years, but the goal is not to replace. It's not a 1-for-1. In other words, whatever we decide on, it's not a FVL for a Black Hawk or Chinook or whatever it works out to be. It's a transition, right? And as you know, you heard the numbers. I mean, we're going to have these aircraft a long time. So when I talked about life cycle costs, and that arrow going this way and then the declining resources going this way, I think your question is well asked, that sustainment gap. So you honed right in on the problem statement. There's a lot of things we're going to have to do. We're going to have to get a little bit smarter. For example, corrosion control, and we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. Corrosion right now, based on a couple different studies, is almost $1 billion problem. And there's ways we can get after to reduce that. So not a primary answer for you, but that's kind of a subset answer, something we can look at. Bob, you want to?
Yeah.
General Marion's
so
right
I'm the phone a friend guy. So what General Gabram was describing is how we get after those things using from a sustainment perspective, and really using sustaining and TT-PEG dollars. So what we're going to have to do as we keep these airplanes around for the next 50 years is combine our efforts and work together as a team to get after our big cost drivers. Airframes is a big piece of it, and we do most of that through the sustaining PEG and Gardner's facility at CCAD. But we can also get after things like cost of engines by using equipping PEG dollars and buying a new motor. And that's the ITEP engine that we've been talking about and that you heard people talk about this morning. So really, it's a combination, and I think your question was pointed, it's a combination between using equipping PEG to buy new equipment that reduces sustainment costs and using sustainment funding to continue to sustain the things we have. And I'll just give you one more perfect example, and that's UH-60 Victor. Yeah. That program, had our two commands not worked together on that program, we would not have been able to digitize the last 760 Blackhawks. And the only reason we're able to do that is because we're using a lot of General Gabram's money at CCAD to recap the airframe, and we're using a lot of equipping PEG dollars to put a new digital cockpit in the aircraft. And at the end, it spits out as a fully bussed, fully digitized Blackhawk that we would have never been able to afford if we didn't combine our $2. So the way we're going to keep these airplanes in the fleet for the next 50 years until FVL, mid-2030s, comes around, is by working together as a team.
So just recap, it's very important. I just want, Garner, if you can touch on recap and what that gives us, how that extends the life of an aircraft.
Right, sir. So we bring in, currently we're doing the AAAL recap program, and we're taking alpha model aircraft, going through, making sure all the structure is sound. We completely strip the aircraft down. We apply modifications to the aircraft to bring it up to the L model configuration.
Garner, use your CCAT voice. Turbo, can you hear us? You hear us in the back? All right. Go on. Yell it out there, man.
Yes, sir.
Sell it.
All right. So we bring it up to the L model configuration, put L model components on it, and the aircraft leaves with the same serial number, but it's now a Lima model aircraft. We're going to apply the same technique to the L to L to V program. We're going to overhaul the L aircraft, bring it back up to the most recent configuration, and we're going to install, as General Marion described, a Victor model a Mike model cockpit in it and a new data bus. So it'll essentially be transparent to the aviator, other than the EPs and limits on the aircraft, much like an A and L are today for those pilots.
So we also have an effort in AMCOM where we look at reliability, availability, maintainability metrics, and we have something called the Army Working Capital Fund Investment Program. And so in FY16 it was about $49 million, where we look at addressing reliability-related issues and obsolescence-related issues. So those things are that money is an annual portion, 2.5% of the Army Working Capital Fund were provided. We take that, we reinvest it to address those issues associated with obsolescence and reliability over the life of those airframes to get some additional benefit out of it.
See, we just had to get warmed up on that answer. That's a good question.
So, and it does extend the life, so that recapitalization extends the life of the aircraft. But the aircraft we're bringing into the plant now...
0 hours, 0 miles.
Right,
Yeah.
it's a zero-time aircraft, zero-time components. The aircraft we're bringing in now have never been to the depot. Those are late 1970s, early 1980s aircraft that have been out in the fleet that long. Once they leave the depot as a Lima model, we wouldn't expect to see those back at the plant for 20, 30 years potentially.
What else we? I know we got some questions in the back. Uh-oh.
Sir, I'll ask you the same question.
All-American.
Duty first.
Air assault. First team.
Roger that. Sir, I'll ask the same question I asked General Gaylor. What keeps you up at night as the leader of AMCOM?
Before or after drinks?
Before, sir.
So that's a great question. And I'll step a little bit out of my lane. I think everybody's tracking the Chief of Staff of the Army's number one priority is readiness, and there is no number one. And that's if we look at readiness and really what it means. And I don't want to speak definitely for the Chief, but my takeaway is, are we ready to go tonight? And that's a different mentality. We think we're ready to go tonight, but there's few units I would challenge that are really ready to go tonight. So we got to get better. And how do we do that? It's a mentality, it's a culture. We're not, FOBs are interesting. We did that for 14 years and everybody did great, but we're ready to go tonight in the dirt. So what if we get the call if things escalate in Russia, with the Ukraine? Really concerned about that. There's two enemies that can change our way of life pretty quickly, and that's Russia and China. So things, the threat is high, the force, funding, etc. I think we all need to go watch the movie 300. I'm not sure, but so we gotta be ready to go, and we gotta do in our lane sustainability. What can we do to facilitate that? So I'll give you an example. General Richardson, when the 101st went to Africa, he saw that coming, so he leaned forward with the team, and we put a set of equipment on the ground, to get ahead of their launch time, essentially. So that's what keeps me up at night. Are we ready at the point of need? Are we ready to go tonight? And arguably, we all could work to do better at that. Thanks.
Sir, thank you for allowing me to ask you this question. So it sounds like, based on what you've said, about 10 years ago, it seemed like the Army was partnering with industry and relying on industry with programs like PBLs and so forth. Now it sounds like you're shifting towards more organic type programs and relying on the Army itself. Is that pretty much where you see your business going?
No, I think, of course, if you look at the acting Secretary of the Army, Honorable Murphy's 3 priorities, his number 2 is public-private relationships. So I think there's got to be a balance, right? And obviously the depot commander sitting up here, I mean the depot, and I wasn't familiar with the depots about 60 days ago as well as I should have been, but General Vi couches it this way, and I'm coming off the question a little bit, but they're our national insurance policy, and General Allen just visited Letterkenny, and I was with him, and the question he asked was, can we surge? Are you ready to surge if called upon? And I think that's a pretty powerful question. So nobody wants to talk about depots because it's not, it's not the sexy color of the day, but it's really, really important in terms of our national, going to war. I mean, the depots do certain things and they do it very well. Now, we have to work to drive down cost because, and I'll let Garner, if he wants to expound upon that, we got to stay competitive. We understand that. But I think there's a balance.
Yes, sir. And certainly, our military is strong, and we're the strongest on the face of the earth for a reason, and a lot of that has to do with the Iron Triangle: government, the military that services the organic base, and the defense industrial base. And certainly, I don't think there would ever be a scenario where we would not be partnering with industry as we move forward, not only just in new procurement, but specifically with the sustainment, which is the longest and most expensive life cycle. And cost is always something we watch very carefully, keeping downward pressure on the cost, the unit funded cost for the things that we produce at the plant, for the soldiers to install on aircraft. We're always looking at that and seeking new ways to partner and new ways to partner within existing relationships to drive those costs down and be more efficient, better, faster, and cost effective.
Okay. Uh-oh.
And we are the sexy unit, sir. We are the sexy unit.
You know what I mean. Jen.
Are you keeping up with your reset goals, and what could potentially derail keeping on top of that?
Yeah. Go ahead. I mean, the short answer is yes, and we're brought today at about 32 aircraft. But ALC, if you want to.
So yes, we work with the units a lot. So there's a 270-day mandate for a reset program for blowing a unit through and then returning the aircraft. But we often end up having to work with the commanders themselves and their units to maintain the aircraft availability within the unit that they need. So what I'm saying is we'll meter the aircraft slower through the reset program, so there's fewer aircraft removed from the unit during that time period to lessen the challenge with managing aircraft availability. Because once the unit gets back from deployment, oftentimes they have to go back in through a retraining cycle, and they get put on task and on mission for other operations. They get sent to the national training centers. So there's a lot of things that get put on that unit pretty quickly as a PCS soldiers. So we need to work with them, and so a lot of times our reset program doesn't stay within that 270-day mandate. We stretch it out, and it's intentional, and it's in working with the commanders. And OCO money is going to be a challenge for the future. We struggle now to, as in the future, and now in the FY16 we're noticing that we're going to have to transition OCO to base. And that OCO piece is what funds our reset program, and I don't see that getting any easier in the future. So that would be the challenge in the days to come.
Cool. This must be the front row question. So,
sorry, round two. James Drew from Flight Global. I've got two questions. I'm actually the A to L conversion. You might be able to shed some light on this. The Air Force had a big plan just last year to buy, I think, 41 or so A models from the Army and then refurbish them for their nuclear security mission that they have. They've since decided to not do that and to buy brand new helicopters. I'm wondering if you have any insight into what happened there. But then also for the wider panel, we don't hear much about sustainment of UAVs. Do you have any comments related to how you look after your UAVs, whether there's any things that you would like to see in terms of upgrades or improvements that would make looking after those birds a little easier?
Okay.
I can start with the 8L.
Yeah.
So I can't comment specifically on the Air Force's decision. Certainly the UH-60PO program office might have more insight onto that, but I really can't answer that question. I know that we were aware of that, and certainly we have the capacity to do that work at the plant. But I think that their decision to buy the Mike models was something you need to address with the Air Force.
So, I mean, I can talk briefly about the UAS. Now, primarily it's a PM-managed contractor logistics support function right now. So the components for the UAS systems, both in the air and ground components, and a lot of the maintenance, the contract logistics support maintenance, is still CLS. So that's not in the Army Working Capital Fund at this time. That's not in the depots at this time. But I will tell you, they have done a tremendous amount to transition contract logistics support tasks over to the soldier task through developing those tasks, doing the valvaires, put it in ITEMs, integrated technical manuals, and transitioning those tasks to soldiers and reducing the overall contract field service rep requirements for maintainers and wrench turners, and that's to get after that expeditionary piece as soldiers as the primary maintainers. Now maybe someday in the future we may have those UAS parts within the Army Working Capital Fund. We may have some UAS at CCAD, but that's still an ongoing discussion that's going to have to be worked out between AMCOM and Pew Aviation and the great partnership we have.
No.
Is there an active push to transition
away from contractor support to a lot more in-house support for UAVs? Is there a push within the Army as you look to be more expeditionary?
So we want to enable the soldiers to do as much as they possibly can. So I think there's every Army leader is working towards that end. It's just finding that right balance of, you know, cost, schedule, performance for the parts and the acquisition sustainment side, and in the program management. So the PM UAS could probably really address that problem most effectively.
So we have done some UAS work at CCAD in the past. So we did some RQ-7 Shadow wing modifications in the past, and the plant is ready with engineers and maintainers, artisans to do that kind of work based upon the needs of the warfighter. And a lot of times it's tech data issues, and sometimes it's just new versus repair decisions that are made for those fleets.
Hey, one thing I will add is we have a pretty aggressive LAR training program out of Fort Huachuca going on right now. We actually established an ELAR program that I think next month or the following month we'll have some guys graduate. So we are leaning very far forward for our LARs and getting after the maintenance as well.
It's logistic assistant representative.
Yeah, so our concurrency with our UAS LARs is pretty good. So they are concurrent, they're proficient with the most modern UAS systems. We're sending them through the OEM courses, and then we're embedding that technical expertise within our LAR university so that we can carry it forward. So we are expanding our LAR support for UAS on the government technical expertise side.
So just a point on the LARs, the logistic assistant representative, that's kind of that's AMCOM's, I don't say global scouts, but global maintainers. And we feel really, I think the feedback you'll get from the brigade commanders and the command sergeants majors and the green suiters here, that they've been very effective, and we take that very serious. So where they're positioned, their training, their technical expertise, great Americans doing super things for the fleet out there. Just want to put a plug in for the LARs. Okay, any other questions? Take one more, maybe. One more. Sure. Sir, General Cody's got a question. We're CSOPs right here. Just in closing, General Gaylor talked about it this morning, and I'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow, and that's, the maintenance, the load we put on our soldiers is unbelievable. So when you look at the hours flown just over the past 14, 15 years, it's mind-boggling. I mean, in 2003, my battalion flew about 800 hours, and we thought we were pretty hua. And then each year, 2,000, 3,000, it's unbelievable. And we've done that on the backs of our soldiers. So Jen, good question on the soldier contractor piece. I do think we're a little bit out of balance. We're coming back, but it's gonna take some time. And there's a lot of other variables involved with that. But we're gonna do everything we can in AMCOM to help the branch do that. And one last idea or point that we're throwing around. Everybody, all the pilots in the audience, you're familiar with readiness levels, RL progression. We're tracked RL 1, 2, 3. We're held to a certain standard. We take a check ride. It's very stringent. Why don't we do that for our enlisted force, for our maintainers? So we bring their skill levels and we track it a little bit closer. So we're taking a look at that. And the branch just put out a great modernization and training strategy earlier in the year. We're working on a sustainment strategy and want to make sure we're nested in that, but we're going to try to make that part of it. I think it's really important. So with that, I know folks look like they need to go get another coffee, so thank you very much and have a good time, and we'll see you around campus.